Hello and welcome into another edition of the Sun Devil Source podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Brooks, and alongside me, as always, is our Sun Devil Source publisher, Chris Cartman. Chris, just the two of us today, no staff writers. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm good. Just got out of a long day of classes, excited to talk about all the stuff we're going to talk about here on today's podcast. We're going to split it up into kind of two parts. We're going to give a little bit of an update on the situation with ASU men's basketball and newly hired head coach Randy Bennett. Then we're going to talk about the midway point of spring football here for Arizona State, how the team's been looking in practice, what the rest of spring could look like. So, Chris, let's just dive straight into it and talk about Randy Bennett and this ASU football staff. There's a lot to break down. Bennett was hired just about over a week ago. He arrived at ASU on March 24th, a Tuesday. And then after that, there was a scheduled press conference for Wednesday. That press conference got postponed. ASU said, hey, he hasn't been feeling well. And then after that scheduled press conference, 5 days later, ASU put out a release with quotes from Randy Bennett, where he said, quote, "Last week when I arrived in Arizona, a health situation surfaced that I'm working through right now. I'm in good hands. We feel good about the plan, and I'm incredibly appreciative of the care that I've received from the team at Mayo Clinic. Everything is under control, and I will be back at full strength soon." Chris, what can you tell us about Bennett's health and everything that's been going on?
Yeah, covering ASU a long time, never seen one of these happen where a new coach immediately has a non-minor health issue that then leads to postponement of his introduction to the media and the fan base. Randy Bennett felt unwell when he arrived via the private plane, charter plane. And then, as you said, the initial press conference was postponed, and then some investigation of his health situation led to some other things that were discovered. And then he had a medical procedure of some kind on Monday of this week. Don't have specifics on that to report at this time, but again, not a minor thing, more like a moderate type of a thing is what I've gathered. And so that prevented ASU from being able to introduce Randy Bennett this week to the media. And I'm not sure exactly when that might happen. I have heard that he's feeling better and that there's some signs of positive, progress with his health situation. Look, there were some concerns about Randy Bennett's age at 63 years old when he was hired. I personally didn't think it was much of an issue, given that several of the Sweet 16 coaches were several years older than Randy Bennett, including up to 10 years older in the case of Rick Pitino. But again, everybody's health situation is entirely unique to themselves. And this thing was unknown, I believe. There's not like a reason why ASU would, I think, ask for Randy Bennett, who was their top target and the guy they wanted to hire. I don't think there's a reason why they would ask him to do some medical stuff before he got the job. And so things that were learned upon him taking the job, that could happen. And so now they're going to try to get through that as best as they can.
And Chris, obviously, we're all glad that, like you said, Bennett seems to be feeling better. Health is of utmost importance. But when you look at the impact that could have with the transfer portal opening up in under a week's time on April 7th, this seems like it could potentially be putting Bennett and the Sun Devils kind of on the back foot when it comes to preparing for stuff like that.
The way that I would answer this question is it takes a huge amount of energy and many hours every day of working hard throughout the year for any of these coaches. Like, it's a demanding job, and it's especially demanding when you are taking over a new school's basketball team and when you have to rebuild a roster by retaining players that you would like to retain, meeting with them, understanding them, watching film, getting to understand who they are. Then you're trying to think about and consider and actively figure out who you would like to maybe bring from St. Mary's to get via transfer, and then who you should be targeting when the transfer portal opens, because that's going to go lightning speed. once that happens on April 7th. And if any coach, Randy Bennett or anyone, is not operating at his full capacity in terms of health, fitness, acuity, the amount of hours and intensity that they can go about doing these things, that creates challenges. And those challenges would have to then be overcome in part by assistant coaches who are going to have to carry a lot of the workload. And by the way, they're all working around the clock as well anyways. So it's not like they have a lot more capacity to like stack additional things onto their plate. It takes everything from all of these people to get a successful launch when you're a new head coach.
And Chris, on the topic of that, part of that statement that ASU put out where Randy Bennett gave that update on his health was because ASU was announcing the hiring of 2 new associate head coaches, one of those being Joe Rahone. He was one of Bennett's associate head coaches while he was at St. Mary's. Now he's coming to ASU to work in that same role. The other one that they announced was Rick Croy, who was the head coach at Cal Baptist, who actually made the NCAA tournament this year as a 13 seed. He's the father of J. Rob Croy, who's a 4-star prospect who had been committed to Bennett at St. Mary's, decommitted, flipped his commitment to ASU to now follow Bennett over to ASU. A quote from Bennett in that ASU release when talking about those hirings, he said, quote, "What I want people to know is that nothing about our momentum has changed. We are moving forward, and I'm excited to announce 2 of our associate head coaches, a duo I have a ton of trust in and a duo that truly wants to be at ASU. They both bring great experience, strong relationships, and real energy as our program continues to grow. I am very confident in where we are going and how this initial group of coaches is coming together. I look forward to meeting everyone who is ready to make Sun Devil basketball great very soon." Chris, what can you tell us about those hirings and what it kind of means for the team?
Yeah, Joe Rahone's played for Randy Bennett, coached under him for some years now, and was promoted to associate head coach. They work very tight, and they have a great understanding of what they're trying to do programmatically with the players they bring into the program and how they coach and develop them. So that helps with the continuity of what they were trying to do at St. Mary's, bringing that over in their culture and all that. And then Rick Croy did a very good job at Cal Baptist. Oversaw the program's transition to the WAC. Their last couple of years were their best years under his coaching. He's been a coach there for many years. And I think that head coaching experience and the success that he's had make it a pretty noteworthy addition. It's not often that you get an NCAA coach to come onto your staff as an assistant coach. And so with the health status being very much a question right now with Randy Bennett and how much he's able to do, Rick Croy, I think, is somebody that will help, along with Joe Rahone, to be able to guide the ship in terms of what they're doing. And as you mentioned there, the son is J. Rob Croy. I mean, he's a top 20 combo guard in the country, a top 150 prospect in the country, a 4-star player. I've heard really good reviews about him. Versatile, lanky, athletic, shoots the ball well, creates, distributor, has some toughness and some hard defensive DNA to him as well. So that's a very important addition at this initial stage of what they're trying to do. I have heard that ASU has targeted David Patrick. He's an assistant coach at LSU. That staff was recently fired. And Will Wade is coming in from NC State to take over the head coaching position. Patrick, though, has 2 years left, I believe, on his existing contract that would have to be bought out by another school. That's expensive, especially when he also costs a lot. And Patrick, though, he would be important, I think, to Bennett because going all the way back to 2006 to 2010, he was an assistant for Randy Bennett at St. Mary's. Patrick was born in Bermuda, but he grew up in Australia, and he helped recruit Patty Mills, who was the best early guard that Randy Bennett got, which was a big catalyst in their success at St. Mary's. He went on to play in the NBA for years, and Patrick was extremely instrumental in helping St. Mary's became this team that was very early at figuring out how to go and get talent from other places in the world, especially Australia, where he had deep roots and played basketball himself, and other places like Lithuania. And so this is going to be a question about whether or not that can get financially worked out to where he could join the staff, or whether Randy Bennett's going to turn to a different direction with that position and fill it elsewhere. And another part of this that's important is I believe that this is going to be the first year where they're going to get rid of rules that limit the number of coaches who are able to instruct in practices. And that would actually open up for your operations people and other people, player development people, to also do on-court instruction as part of coaching. And so you're probably going to see more like 4 or 5 assistant coaches on Randy Bennett's staff this year, as opposed to just like 3.
And Chris, to kind of put a button on everything men's hoops, when you compartmentalize everything that we've been talking about so far in this podcast episode, what do you expect ASU's roster to look like next year? Because there's a lot to consider. I mean, Bennett himself is represented by the same agency as Masamba Diop and Santiago Truitt, 2 players from ASU's roster last year. You talk about potential Australian ties. You talk about St. Mary's ties and all these other things kind of being woven together. What could the roster look like?
Yeah, so I think there's going to be several or more players who stay at ASU. They weren't high enough profile to where they're going to have like a big value in the transfer portal, but some of these guys were good enough that you would like for them to continue at ASU. You named 2 of them. I think that, of course, you'd like to be able to have a starting center and a starting power forward from the Big 12 who did reasonably well. And Masamba Diop, of course, would be one of the top center transfers in the portal if he were to announce that he was going to leave ASU. I think that these people are figuring out, through the situation that Randy Bennett's going through and the assistant coaches, where they stand and where they're at. I had thought that maybe there was a reasonable chance that few players, maybe several players from St. Mary's would come over to join Randy Bennett's program at ASU. That he had 3 first-team all-conference WCC players, 2 guards, and then a power forward. And I'm hearing more recently that may not happen. There hasn't been anybody that I think where it's been clear to me that they're planning to transfer to ASU. Of course, as again, the portal's not open for another 5 days, so maybe this evolves and we learn more about that. I think that there's going to be a lot of transfers from other college teams, and then probably some international players, several. I mean, I could easily see a half dozen players from international markets that end up part of this team. It's going to be, I would say, probably mostly new players to the Sun Devils and mostly international players and transfer portal players. And we have a portal mega thread in the Devil Sanctuary at Sun Devil Source where there's, I don't know how many hundreds of posts already or whatever.
And so many posts on that.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to drop in there because I've heard some stuff about some guys that I think ASU is going to target, that I'm going to subsequently, after this podcast, go in there and make some posts. I think one center in particular, I think ASU might go after, especially in the case of Masamba Diop departing. And I think, though, again, when we get to April 7th, you're going to see a whole bunch of offers, and then you're going to see visits lined might get a much better idea of what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, well, as Chris said, make sure to check out that mega thread on the board to see that information he's talking about. After you finish watching this episode of the podcast, we're at about that transition period of the podcast, Chris. Let's start talking about some ASU spring football. But first, we're going to have a word from our presenting sponsors over at Jones Auto Centers.
For over 60 years, the Glenn Jones name has been recognized for integrity and honesty.
From the Jones Auto Centers in Wickenburg.
Jones Ford Verde Valley.
Take a nice country drive out to Buckeye.
talking about Arizona's best. You're talking about the Jones Auto Group. It's quick, fast, strong.
I want to invite you to visit our new facility in Casa Grande and enjoy our country-style way of doing business. We're the Joneses.
Welcome back into the Son of a Source podcast presented by Jones Auto Centers. Wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, be sure to check out the description because you can contact Parker Jones directly through phone or email if you're interested in buying a new or used vehicle from one of Jones Auto Centers' many dealerships around the Valley. Parker Jones and Jones Ford Verde Valley have been huge supporters of ASU's NIL efforts over the past several years, so we're proud to have them as our presenting sponsors, and that's another great reason for you Sun Devil fans to make them your go-to if you live in the Valley and need a new or used vehicle. All right, Chris, ASU football halfway through spring practices, 7 practices in the books. It's going by really fast. It feels like it just started literally yesterday. ASU is going to have a live scrimmage this Saturday, so 2 days from now, which will give us and everybody else a little bit of a better look at what this roster could be looking like. But the talk of the town this spring has been the quarterback position. Sam Levitt transfers to LSU. ASU brings in Cutter Boley, brings in Mikey Keene. Jake Fetty comes in from high school. And you have a little bit of a 4-way QB battle between Fetty, Boley, Keene, and Cam Dyer. What have you made of how the 4 of them have looked and how that battle could be shaping out thus far in spring?
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch. I think Cutter Boley is the odds-on favorite to be the starting quarterback. Certainly, by no means is this decided. It's going to take into August, I think, to sort itself out. The first 5 practices were scripted offense, so you didn't really see play calling or organic, natural drives. It's really only in practices 6 and 7 that we started to see Kenny Dillingham calling plays, and the teams were given the ability to go on just natural sort of drives and see how they played out. Cutter Boley had a very good practice on Tuesday in a scrimmage. And I think that what he does very well is operationally, he gets the ball in the quick game and screen game to where it should go. And he's accurate and seems to have a good command of the scheme for somebody who's just new and learning it. He's big, he's strong, he moves a little bit better than I think people would expect. He's not quick twitch sudden, but he's somebody that can get out and run in the RPO game. Thing that I think is gonna be key to whether he can win the job is avoiding turnovers. He was a little bit turnover prone at Kentucky as a redshirt freshman, first year starter in the SEC, super difficult, right? But I think he has more talent naturally than Mikey Keene. Mikey Keene is an operator, not the biggest, not the fastest, not the biggest arm, but he's somebody that manages the game at a pretty good level. He threw a couple of interceptions on Tuesday, so he can't have that happen because his ceiling isn't probably as high in terms of his physical tools as Cutter Boley. The guy that I think has impressed me the most, just relative to what maybe I expected at this point, has been Jake Fetty. And especially in the last couple of practices, he had a very impressive practice on Thursday. And the reason that I've been so impressed by him is because I've seen a lot of freshmen over the years come in, and it's a big task. It's a much tougher to learn the schematics of a college offense versus high school. He didn't really have like the quarterback gurus. He wasn't like the super polished guy that came from the gilded pathway to ASU. And for someone with his background, the first practice or 2 was kind of rough, straight up. But more recently, pocket feel, awareness, processing, his reactiveness, he's got some quick twitch to him. He actually has some sort of Sam Levitt type qualities in terms of how he's, the height, weight, size, arm, speed, quickness, that kind of stuff, the improvisational stuff, throwing off platform, right? So he's very intriguing to me in that respect. I think that clearly that was a good take for ASU. Cam Dyer has been quite respectable. Remember, he had the ACL injury that sidelined him for almost all last year coming off of high school, where he got hurt in the state championship game the prior December. He got cleared and he was full go in like the end of November or early December, bowl practices. Now he's starting to get it going. He's done a very good job managing the series that he's had and not throwing the ball into jeopardy. And yes, his throwing mechanics I don't think are quite as polished. And I don't think that his ability to consistently get the ball exactly where you'd like it to be is quite as good maybe as you'd want for somebody to contend for the starting job. But given his background and his arc and the injuries coming off of, I think that he has done a very respectable job as well.
And Chris, in terms of skill positions, ASU had a massive overhaul in the transfer portal at wide receiver, bringing in 2 of the top 5 wide receivers in Omarion Miller and Reed Harris, and also bringing in a highly touted top 30 wide receiver in Raiden Vinesbright. ASU has also had to replace a lot of key guys at other positions. At running back, you're losing first team all-conference running back Raleek Brown. At tight end, you're losing a true staple in Shimon Mateer. How have all of the skill position guys looked so far this spring?
Yeah, look, replacing somebody of Jordan Tyson's talent and stature is extremely difficult. But there was a huge drop-off between Tyson and the other receivers in that group last year. And, of course, Sam Levitt tended to really focus on getting the ball to Jordan Tyson. But I think that the overall capability of the wide receiver room shouldn't be less than last year. It should actually maybe be a little bit better than last year. And that is because ASU did a good job with this trio of transfer receivers that they added. Raiden Vinesbright's the 3rd highest rated, and I look at him and I see a starting caliber Big 12 wide receiver. He's smooth, he's polished, he catches everything. He has good feel for the game, a little bit bigger and maybe a little bit more athletic than I was expecting. Reed Harris is a specimen. Like, there's just not a lot of guys that look like him. You know, he's 6'5" and he's 215 pounds, and his catch radius is like tremendous. Like, he looks like Mike Evans or somebody in his stature. And I'm not saying that he's Mike Evans, but the point is that he probably runs a 4.5 40 and has a great catch radius, and he's big and athletic, and you can do a lot of things with a guy like that, right? And and he may or may not even be the number 1. It's like Omarion Miller and Reed Harris are like both very impressive. Miller is good size, strong, sturdy player. I don't know that he has the route polish that I think he will have in another 2 or 3 years, but explosive athlete, ball in hand. He can take the top off the defense. He can get it in the screen game and like run through the defense. He's hard to tackle. He's got a physical edge to him. And all these guys can be moved around the formation and create a lot of challenges. And then, look, Jaron Hamilton, he's a go ball guy. Like, he's a guy that has elite speed, can take the top off the defense. Jalen Moss, I think he had a disappointing year because of his health and injuries and stuff. But he's had touchdowns in back-to-back days, and he's a good zone beater. Derek Eusebio's got a foot injury that he's rehabbing, so he's not been out there. I think the wide receivers look pretty good. At tight end, they have to replace their top 2 guys in snap counts. Shimon Mateer, you know, all-league-ish caliber of a tight end. They added Anthony Miller, phenomenal-looking, 6'6", 265 or 60, whatever he is. I mean, 7-foot wingspan. He looks great. He runs. He moves. Kamari Anderson, impressive athlete, sleek and glider around the field, and has some moxie and will block you. And AJE is just, you know, he's very large and physical upside. So they're probably going to be an average group because none of these guys have done it at a high level. You know, Miller started at Tulane. That was a very good 10-win team or whatever. But and then at running back, no, right, they lost Raleek Brown. They returned Kyson Brown. He was the starter going into last season, got hurt at Mississippi State, and then didn't play again the rest of the year. He looks back to full strength. He's had a good beginning to camp. David Avett, who's one of their 2 junior college players, I think he's done pretty well out there. He's been a little bit banged up. Marquise Gillis, another JUCO guy, hasn't gone in 11s yet. He's been banged up, so we'll see about him. They added Carde Mack as a freshman who looks like, the part. He's got, he's like stocky kind of a build, but he's got quick feet and he moves well. They have Jason Brown, who had a very good performance against Duke in the Sun Bowl, and Demarius Man Robinson. Those are your quicker scat back. Very, very much of a contrast between them and then David Abbott and Marquise Gillis, who are like 220 to 230 pound guys. So you got a range of different types of backs. Kyson Brown's like maybe, and Carde Mack, they're maybe like more in between the 2 different types. So there's a lot of options. There's very little separation between this group, and we're going to see a war between now and the beginning of the season to figure out what that depth chart is going to look like. I think there's going to be some roles that are carved out, short yardage. David Avett is a guy that I can see in the short yardage. Then you got Kenny Dillingham has alluded to the possibility of playing more 20 and 21 personnel, 2 backs in the formation. Okay, in that situation, you want some guys that are going to be able to be pass catchers and line up wide and be dynamic. That's where you get Kyson Brown, Man, Robinson, Jason Brown, right? So there's nobody that looks to me like they are that true signature star running back that they're going to be able to rely upon. But their run game production in these practices has actually been quite good. I shouldn't even forget Grayson Rigdon. I think he redshirted last year, had very good bowl practices in December, and he's had good practices at the outset of spring ball, and he actually could be in the mix as well. He's going to get bigger and stronger, and he has good contact balance, and it wouldn't even surprise me if he ends up being in the mix.
And Chris, it seems like a constant theme amongst all those skill positions has been roster turnover. That theme is also prevalent on the offensive line. You have Maxi Honachor declaring for the NFL draft. You have Ben Coleman gone, Kyle Scott gone, Josh Atkins, he transfers away. So a lot of new guys having to gel together on that offensive line. In your opinion, how has that gelling looked so far in spring?
This has been one of the most positive surprises, I would say, of spring ball for ASU. And especially because Jermaine Mitchell, the number 1 overall junior college prospect, hasn't gone yet in 11-on-11 action because he's working his way back from an issue, an injury. He's out there every day. But I think that Tana Alo-Tupuola, the center transfer from Georgia Tech, is going to be a big difference. They didn't have Ben Coleman last year because he got hurt for half or more of the year, but he was playing center really for the first time. And I think Tana Alo-Tupuola is going to be able to be more like what Lee Fautanu was for ASU a couple of years ago. He was the starter as a sophomore at Georgia Tech with Haynes King, one of the most potent rushing attacks in the country. And he plays with a very impressive operational execution, snapping, feel, assignments, angles in the run game. He anchors in pass pro. So when you have that type of a center, it sort of makes everything else work more seamlessly around him. And Wade Helton started at center last year when Ben Coleman went out of the lineup, and he's another good option either at center or at guard. He's played a lot of guard, including at guard next to Tupuola. So I feel like that's really nice. They have Mekhi Stewart, who was starting as a true freshman last season by the end of the year, and he has NFL upside. And then you get to some of their tackles, and they added Luke Baklenko, who had been a starter at Stanford a couple of years ago, early on in his college career, including, I think, as a true freshman part-time starter. Transferred to Oklahoma. I think he was their top backup tackle, came in, moves better than I expected, great frame, has all of the requisite tools. Is he going to be as good as Maxi Honachor at right tackle? Probably not, but I think he's going to be a very solid player maybe even a good player there. And then between Champ Westbrooks, who I think has been one of the best young O-line prospects on their team. As he's gotten bigger and stronger, he looks more and more capable. I think he has a very good chance to be a starter, potentially at left tackle. We'll see what happens with Jermaine Mitchell. And then Jalen Clem, who had the health issue that really kept him out for a year. He looks like he's added some size and strength, and he's very pretty pass pro, moves well. So I see a bunch of options here for ASU to mix and match and moves guys around. Didn't even mention Lenny Lapuaho, who's a junior college player who's looked better than I expected as a tackle, and Rob Lapuaho, who I think they're cousins, like more like removed, but I think they're cousins. And I think Rob Lapuaho is a guy who has long-term potential to play in the NFL. So I can't really say enough about the job that ASU's offensive line coaches and the recruiting have done in bringing in these players. And Sanga Tuitele is really good. And you can see why USC and these other schools have actually tried to hire him away. And ASU's done a good job of fending that off because the development and the depth now in that group are very impressive.
Chris, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the defensive side of the ball. In terms of the front six for ASU, the defensive line and the linebackers, I sound like a broken record at this point. There's been turnover when it comes to those positions. What has that part of ASU's defense looked like so far in practice? Because there were a lot of big name additions like Owen Long coming from Colorado State at linebacker. How has that front six looked?
Well, there's a important caveat here, which is that CJ Fight and Zach Swanson have not participated in 11s. They're going to be fine. Like their health they're close to being able to be out there. So they're going to be fully healthy sooner rather than later. But those are CJ Fight is like an all conference caliber D tackle. Zach Swanson, arguably their second best D tackle, and Michael Gardner, who had a Achilles rupture, also would be probably in their top 4 or 5 defensive tackles. So you're missing 3 of them. So ASU has run the ball better than the defensive line has stopped the run. Well, I think it's largely because of this factor, right? Yeah. But Blazin Lona Wong he has as much seniority as anybody on the ASU football team, and he's done well. And they have Rashad McKenzie, who was a Washington State transfer who got hurt and didn't play last year. He's looked good. And I think the most impressive thing for me has been their defensive end transfers. Jalen Thompson coming in from Michigan State, where he was a starter for some of the action over a couple of years. And then Imarion Winston, who came in from Baylor. Okay, these guys are strong, physical. They stop the run reasonably well. They have some athleticism. With ASU losing Prince Dorba and Justin Watley and Elijah O'Neal, they needed guys who were ready to come in and make an impact right away. I think they got that in those 2 guys. That's been a very impressive thing. And then they have Julian Lugo's been like a borderline revelation. Like he's looked like wow. I think Texas tried to come in and steal him late, and he's a DN who's like every bit of 6'4" and 250 something, and he looks like he's ready to compete in the 2 deep. So that's one of the more impressive freshman arrivals. You mentioned Owen Long. He led the country last year in tackles at Colorado State, and I think he has a very high football IQ, just an absolute nose for the football, like play diagnostic skills to understand where the ball is going and why and how within whatever type of a offensive scheme that he's going up against. And then Martell Hughes coming along. I think he's ready to be a starter. I think Prairie Young Black Goat had a great day today, and he's a former walk-on who's got a great story. One of the world-class names and a Native American background. And I think he has a chance to compete. And they got Ramir Davis, who a linebacker transfer from NAU, who's a little bit bigger and than I expected and a good athlete. So I think that, it's tough when you don't have some of these most important guys. And I'm curious to see what they look like when they get those guys back. We just may not know really until the end of spring. The one thing I can say is Brian Ward's defenses have been really good, if not great, at stopping the run over the last 2 seasons. And so structurally, I know that they have the right scheme to be able to do that. And I think that they have enough players that once they get these guys back, that this will become a true war at the point of attack.
Yeah, definitely, Chris. And in terms of turnover, there might not have been more anywhere else than in the secondary. I mean, at ASU's Pro Day, they could have fielded a whole secondary with how many guys were out there. Keith Abney, Xavier Alford, Miles Rouser, Kendrick Breedlove, Nyland Green. A lot of guys are going to have to step up. When Keith Abney was asked at the Combine who the next ASU CB1 to turn heads in the NFL draft process could be, he said he thinks it could be Rodney Bimage. ASU went out and also got a lot of guys in the transfer portal. You've got Ashton Stamps, you got Lyric Rawls, a lot of different pieces coming together in the secondary. How has that unit looked so far?
Yeah, they're longer and rangier, and so when this is primarily a zone defense, Ward scheme, cover 3, right? And so that length matters a lot because you're trying to contest passing lanes, get your hands on the football, right? And Keith Abney and Javen Robinson and Breedlove and Alford, it was a lot of 5'10" or so guys, right? All these guys are 6 foot plus. They got long wingspans. Brian Carrington said it looks like a basketball court. It was like a bunch of guards out there. And I think a few guys have really caught my eye. Number one, Ashton Stamps, the LSU transfer. He started for a couple of years at LSU, and he was younger. He was a backup last year, injury and other issues. I think he's going to be as good, or if not better, than Javen Robinson. He had a pick 6 that was very impressive. He's had a lot of stuff that has really flashed, I would say. Rodney Bimage, I've been saying for a while, I think he has as much NFL upside as just about anybody returning to the team from last year. And when he was out there, his PFF grades were just as good as Javen Robinson. And he's also longer and bigger. He's coming back from a shoulder and injury and whatnot, but he's going to be fine. I think they have a guy named Caleb Chester who transferred from Texas. He had a very good day today. He's caught my eye throughout camp. I feel like he's somebody who probably would have maybe not started at Texas, but been in there too deep, which is hard to do with their secondary. So, and then at safety, Lyric Rawls, he was a starter at Kansas and one of their top, maybe their leading tackler. He's a true free safety, but has the versatility to play other positions, and he's looked like he's ready to be a starter. Guy who's kind of surprised me is Josiah McGrew. He was a starter as a freshman at FIU, very lanky, 6'2", maybe even 6'3", super long wingspan, and he's shown really great range from that middle field, that center field position, to be able to get to the sideline. He had an interception of Cutter Bowley on Saturday in a scrimmage component. He's made a bunch of plays. So they're going to move Boogie Wilson down to nickel. He had a shoulder surgery, so he hasn't gone yet. They have other guys that are playing in that role. Montana Warren has been able to play nickel, strong safety. So I think they have a bunch of guys throughout their secondary. It's a matter of getting them to be assignment sound and to have a good chemistry and feel for one another and be able to execute. But the thing I would say is overall, for a team that lost as much as it did in terms of starters, you can tell that ASU brought in the number 15 transfer portal class in the country as rated by 24/7 Sports, because a lot of the guys that they added have very impressive length, frames, movement skills, and in some ways maybe even better than guys that they replaced. Now, they don't have the ability to execute at the level of the guys that they're replacing yet, right? So it's going to come down to how much that these guys are able to lock in on their assignments and play with a really high football IQ and a strong sense of what they're trying to do individually and collectively. But I think that the general sentiment is going to downgrade ASU this season because of all the losses, right? And they have a tough schedule. But like, I think I saw like ASU's a 6.5 over/under team in betting markets right now. And I think this looks like a team that should be a bowl eligible team and probably not like barely scraping into bowl eligibility. It should be a little bit better than that. If, very importantly, they do a good job of taking care of the football on offense, especially at the quarterback position. That is preeminent of importance. If they're able to do that, I think they have a chance to be better than people will generally expect.
Yeah, Chris. And last but certainly not least, we've got to talk special teams. Special teams was a huge talking point for the majority of last season, week in and week out throughout the year. Now ASU has a little bit of a new look on special teams. There's a punting competition. They brought in Nick McClarty from Ohio State, who's towering at 6 feet, 7 inches tall. There's a new kicker who's come into town in Carson Smith. There's a new punting specialist coach in Mike Seifries, who's been helping out on that side of the ball as well with special teams coordinator Jack Nudo. How has that unit been looking throughout spring?
I think Mike Seifries is going to be a massive addition. I've never seen coaching of punters as good as what we're seeing at ASU right now. And that's partly because they changed the rule that the last couple of years they've allowed more instruction by non-position coaches, right? So analysts and quality control people can be out there and coaching. So ASU had like Marvin Lewis, who was a head coach and a great defensive coordinator. When he was an analyst at ASU, he couldn't coach. Now, that was hard. Kevin Mawai is a Hall of Fame offensive lineman, and he couldn't coach, right? Well, now these guys are able to coach. And Nick McClarty has a very big leg. Now, punting when there's nobody around and you knock it 70 yards and kick it over the fence, okay, cool, great. He's got to be able to do it on time, in rhythm, with a punt block coming at him. Mm-hmm. Much harder. And he hasn't done nearly as well at just when he's just kicking in individual position work, but still better than anything that we saw last year from ASU. And I think better than Canyon Floyd has done so far in spring ball. He has a good leg too. It's more about how composed that you are in the steps and the process, and then how good that the drop is to have a repeatable process, right? That's the challenge. So, but ASU was last in net punting in Power 4 level last year. Dillingham has referenced this. It's a huge emphasis that they're trying to improve because they need to have much better field flipping and average field position, starting position relative to their opponents, right? And then ASU had a pretty good kicker last year, won a couple games for them with his leg. Also missed some kicks, but Carson Smith has been out there, transferred in from Austin P. He was an FCS conference kicker of the year. And he had played for Jack Nudo previously, so they have a very strong familiarity. And he's been quite accurate, I would say, on the field goal kicking that we saw today. For example, he made 4 of 5 field goals. He missed from 52 yards into a breeze. He hit the crossbar and the ball backed up off the crossbar. It was a little bit of an exciting moment, not positively, but Carson Kiefer's a backup. I think Smith has been better than Kiefer to this point. Kiefer had a couple good kicks today. But yeah, I think that ASU special teams need to be better, especially with the punting. And there are some signs that could be on the way in the fall.
Well, Chris, that'll just about do it for this edition of the Sun Devil Source podcast. Like we mentioned, ASU spring football is going to have that live scrimmage on Saturday. We'll both be out there. Anything specific that you're looking out for when we're there?
Man, it's a live scrimmage, man. Let's see let's see if the intensity is what it needs to be. Let's check out the ball security. Most important thing is do not turn the football over, right? And then defensively, do not give up big plays. Those are to me the hallmarks. If they can not have a lot of penalties, not turn the ball over, not give up big plays, then they're showing that they're trending in the right direction.
Yeah, well, like I said, we'll have coverage from that scrimmage. And like Chris said earlier in this podcast episode, make sure to check out our Sun Devil Source board thread with the ASU men's basketball roster mega thread. A lot of updates going to be going in there from Chris tonight and as well throughout this next week, 2-week period as the transfer portal opens up in just 5 days. But for this episode of the Sun Devil Source podcast, I'm Jacob Brooks. That's Chris Cartman. To keep up with all of our ASU men's basketball and football coverage, make sure to check out sundevilsource.com. And we hope you all have a good one.